water went into his wound and he died. So the Prophet ﷺ, or when they returned and they told Allah's Messenger that, he said, قَتَلُوهُ قَتَلَهُمُ اللَّهُ. He said, they killed him, may Allah kill them. أَلَا سَأَلُوا إِذْ لَمْ يَعْلَمُوا. Would they not ask when they did not know? Indeed, the remedy of someone who's ignorant is a question. It would have sufficed him to make tayammum and then wrap or bandage his wound and wipe over it and then wash the rest of his body. So the Prophet ﷺ in this hadith taught us exactly those 3 steps. He's got to do tayammum, and in this case he was doing ghusl, so tayammum could go at any point. So he put tayammum first, and then wipe over the covering, and then do his ghusl, and that would be enough. So the person again has to do those 3 things. They have to do as much washing as they can, wipe over the covering, and do tayammum, and then that's what enables them to pray. So there's another point here that's a digression before we're going to deal with when they have to and when they don't have to repeat prayers. That this hadith is a proof of the obligation of learning knowledge and asking those who are qualified. So not like, if someone teaches without learning, they're doing something that they're not authorized to do. And in this case, mashallah, the Prophet ﷺ made gave a very severe judgment concerning them giving a ruling without knowledge. And that's something that unfortunately, occurs a lot, is that, everybody with the Yusuf Ali and a translation of Sahih Bukhari raises himself up to be a mufti and starts giving judgments. You know what I'm saying? But what you're doing is, basically, if you say this is halal and this is haram, you're saying the Lord of the heavens and the earth forbade this or permitted that. And one can't do that without license. You know what I'm saying? And someone was telling us that there's a lot of people that think they're married and they're not married because they're ignorant muftis that gave them fatwas. So that's a big deal, and we really need to learn knowledge. And also a logical extension from this is the obligation of sacred knowledge being passed in chains. Because the only way that someone who's ignorant can do is ask someone who knows, and the only place that person could have got their knowledge is by asking someone else who knew, because they're not a prophet. And then that goes back to the Prophet Muhammad who he was the only one that received revelation in the case of our ummah and his sacred law, salawatu alayhi. So in any case, that's what one does. When one has a covering, does a normal wudu or ghusl, does tayammum at the point of the injured part, and the wudu has its normal intention, the tayammum has its normal intention that was already covered, and they also wipe over the covering. And those are all obligations. So then the next question is, when do they have to repeat prayers and when don't they? And this is one of the tough questions in the Shafi'i school. This one is a toughie. So there's a dispensation in Reliance of the Traveler for this. We're going to teach the relied upon position though. But there's some ease in the Reliance of the Traveler that many will need to take. So then he goes on to say, he is not required to repeat the prayer if the splint was applied while he was in a state of ritual purity. And it is not on the limbs upon which dry ablution is made, face and arms up to the elbow. So basically, when he's doing this tayammum, why is he doing it? He's doing it because his wudu was deficient. So then, like in the first example I mentioned, if I have a cast on my wrist, then I didn't make a complete wudu, and what was to make up for the incomplete wudu was also incomplete. So I don't have either, this is incomplete and that's not complete. I don't have complete wudu and I don't have complete ghusl. So that's why he mentioned that here, that he has to make up his prayer. And then another issue is that they treat the covering the same way they treat khufs, for instance. And that one puts it on in a state of purity, so then one wipes over it, and under it was pure, and one wiped over it, and then one did a tayammum, then you're straight. So basically, there are 5 scenarios There are 5 scenarios for putting a covering on part of your body in wudu and ghusl. There's 5 scenarios. Suwar al-Jabira Khams. Suwar al-Jabira Khams. There are 5 scenarios. So the first scenario is that the covering is on the place where you make tayammum. That's the face, or the hands from the fingertips to the elbow. There's a difference of opinion that gives us a little bit of help, that says you just make tayammum from the fingertips to just up above the wrist. But in any case, if the covering is on the place where you make tayammum, you have to repeat your prayers, whether you put the covering on in a state of purity or not, and whether it covered anything beyond the injury or not. Why? Because you didn't have a complete wudu and you don't have a complete tayammum. So your purification is incomplete unless you have to repeat the prayer. Go ahead.
So we say you have a covering on the place that you make tayammum, but it depends on if you're looking for wudu or ghusl, right?
Nope. Tayammum doesn't differ whether it's for wudu. Tayammum doesn't differ whether it's tayammum instead of wudu or tayammum instead of ghusl. Tayammum is always on the hands and face. So the first scenario is you put the covering on one of the places where you make tayammum, which is the face and hands. So in that first scenario, you have to repeat the prayer. Second scenario is the covering is not on one of the places you make tayammum. It's not on the face and hands. However, you put it on and you weren't in a state of purity. So you didn't have wudu, or you hadn't made ghusl after a major ritual impurity. So you put it on and you were impure, so wiping it over doesn't really, it's like wiping over khus when you put them on impure. It doesn't count. Right? You have to repeat the prayer in that case too. La ilaha illallah. They say that like the construction workers in regions where there was knowledge, like if one of them would get injured or something, the first thing they would say on the crew is have him, do wudu, and then we'll fix him up so that after that he wouldn't have to repeat his prayers. And like recently, some of our family, they they had an IV started and things were all taped up. Same thing. Like if someone's going to start an IV on you and put a tape over it, you're going to put a Band-Aid on that you plan on leaving on. You're going to do stitches. Someone else in the family is going to do stitches. Fortunately, they had some fiqh, so they knew to do purification first. Or actually, they didn't need to. They didn't need to, but we talked about that. So in any case, that's something to be aware of. If you're going to put a covering on, do it when you're in a state of purity. And then after that, you're straight. Third scenario. It's not on a place where you make tayammum. And you put it on in a state of purity. However, you covered more than necessary in order for the bandage or cast or whatever to properly adhere. Right? You needed a little Band-Aid and you put on a big old, one of those 2x2 Band-Aids. So that basically there's something that you are supposed to be washing that you're not able to wash. So there's negligence there. In that third scenario also, you have to repeat your prayer. La ilaha illallah. This is a hard question in the Shafi'i school. So it's not on the place of tayammum. You put it on in a state of purity, but you covered too much. So same thing, if you're having somebody hook you up, tell them to just do as much. And also like an IV even, if they're going to do your IV, they could do it on your hands, but you could have them do it on your forearm, have them do that. Because then you could still wash the hand, do the tayammum on the hand. Or if they were going to do it on your forearm, you could have them do it on your bicep, have them put it on your bicep, so that then you can make it complete. And not cover more than is necessary, because then you're not doing all that is possible for you. So there's some negligence there on your part or on the part of the person who's treating you, which is another reason why Muslims have to be involved in healthcare. A lot of fard kifayas don't help us. We need help, or a lot of religious obligations, we need help to properly perform them from someone in the medical field. And there needs to be a fiqh for those who are in the medical field too, so that they can help us with these things. Tayyib, those first three scenarios. Fourth scenario, it's not on an area that you perform tayammum, and you didn't cover anything except the wound. Then in that case, you don't have to repeat the prayer, regardless of whether you put it on in a state of purity or not, because the wudu does everything that you can, and then what you can't do in wudu is covered by the tayammum, and you're straight, and you're straight. So what only covers just the part that's injured? I used to think, the fuqaha, they say in fiqh, just because you imagine something doesn't mean it will actually occur. Sometimes the fuqaha say things that are hypothetical. But actually then someone got stitches, and I realized that stitches are an example of that. Stitches, all they do is cover, just the wounded area. So if somebody had a stitch, for instance, on their leg, and it was in a state of ghusl, then they just wash as much as they can, wash as close to that as around, and then do a tayammum on account of what they couldn't wash, and they'd be straight. And they wouldn't have to repeat anything. So that's the fourth scenario. It's not on a place where you make tayammum, and you don't cover any of the healthy part of your body. So then the tayammum, what you can wash is washed, and what you can't wash is made up for by having a complete tayammum, because it wasn't on a place where you make tayammum. The fifth scenario, again the fourth scenario, you don't have to make it up. The fifth scenario is that it's not on a place where you make tayammum, and it only covered as much as the healthy area of your body that was necessary for it to adhere, right? Or like a cast. They only made the cast as big as you needed it for you to be, for you to properly heal, and you put it on in a state of purity. So there, you've washed as much as you can. You wiped over it, and you only covered as much of the healthy area as you could, and then you did tayammum on account of the wounded area. So in that case, you're straight, and you don't have to make up prayers either. And those are the 5 scenarios of doing tayammum when you have a covering. First scenario is it's on one of the places where you make tayammum. Forget it; you have to repeat because your tayammum is going to be incomplete. Second, it's not on a place of tayammum, but you covered more of the healthy area than necessary. Third, it's not on a place of tayammum, and you didn't cover more of the healthy area than necessary, but you put it on and you weren't in a state of purity. In those 3, you have to repeat the prayer. Fourth scenario, it's not on a place of tayammum, and you didn't cover anything but the wounded area. Then in that case, you don't have to repeat. Fifth scenario, it's not on a place of tayammum. You cover some of the unwounded area or uninjured area, but only enough for the covering to properly adhere, and you put it on in a state of purity. In that case, you don't have to repeat as well, and Allah knows best. La ilaha illallah. Questions on that before we move on?
So how can you know, like when you get an IV, how can you know if that was enough for the IV to actually adhere to tape that they use, or whether or not
Tell the person you have to make ablution, so only cover as much as they can for it to be sound. And if you believe that that's what they did, you should be okay, inshallah. And also, if you ask them to put up one of your biceps,